connect after this call and try to plug it in. But I wish it was around, you know, years ago for myself, Chuck. So
Yeah,
yeah,
Yeah.
saved me a
Even
lot
when
of
we had
headache.
even when we had junior achievement, it wasn't that far reaching, you know, and that hasn't been a thing for our kids for a while. So I'm very proud of you, and hope to be able to help with your efforts in any way we can.
Yeah.
definitely. Thank you.
So we are live. Hello, Facebook, to bring you into the conversation. Um, Today marks the second day of Ashe Cultural Center's week-long program called Losing Louisiana. Land, people, and culture. So, in recognition of where we are as a social moment, as a physical moment, the reality of our um, our e- our ecosystem. We wanted to bring together some important folks who are fighting for important issues and highlight their voices and really talk about ways that our cultural community can provide solutions to some longstanding issues. So yesterday we had the honor of Monique Harton and Logan Atkinson, really who have been champions on the ground for this work and have been representing for us in so many ways in conversations, letting us know how we can start to represent for them in some ways. And so to expand that conversation today, we have brought together an entire group of cultural warriors who are really on the front lines of this fight. And I would like to welcome them and welcome you to the conversation. And we will start that by having our Chief Creative Officer, who I was just acknowledging his hard work for us yesterday at the Good Trouble rally. Thanks to everybody who came out to that and, highlighted this issue there, as well as the other budget equity issues that we are facing in our city, and hoping that you will all bring your voices to that fight. So Frederick Delahousse, lovingly known as would you please lead us in the land acknowledgement?
Thank you, Saleh Ashe. Family, we deliver a land acknowledgement to affirm the historical legacy of colonialism by honoring and paying respect to the land, which was taken by conquest along with the domination of the people who inhabited the land and the imposition of white supremacy. We do it to raise greater public consciousness of Native sovereignty and cultural rights, and we do it as a small step toward equitable relationships and reconciliation. So as we gather together today on the ancestral lands of the Atacapa, Eshak, of the Caddo, the Chitimacha, the Choctaw, the Homa, the Natchez, and Tunica peoples, as well as the Petite Nations, we also try to recognize those folks who were pushed into Louisiana from their ancestral lands. That would be the Alabama, the Biloxi, the Cosada, the Ofo folks. We do this to try to learn about the Native and Indigenous peoples, their histories, and the present-day communities of Louisiana. But we also do this land acknowledgement, as I spoke to Monique earlier, about the historical legacy of colonialism, but also to acknowledge the non-ways of knowing that holistically link mind, body, and spirit, and link the human and non-human ways of knowing. We acknowledge that the space that we are in, the land that we are on, are all a part of how we are and how we know the world. And it also allows us to raise a series of questions about what it means to live in a post-colonial world. What did it take for us to get here? How can we be accountable for our part in that history? Questions about whose knowledge is honored, validated, legitimized, whose knowledge gets erased. Is that acknowledgement, the space that we inhabit shapes what we know and what we consider to be knowledge and how knowledge is constructed. So we give thanks to all the nations and tribes who were the original inhabitants of this land and once occupied what is now Louisiana, the original inhabitants of the Atchafalaya Basin, Mississippi River, as well as the Gulf Coast. We know these folks were instrumental in making this land what it is, and we are blessed to have the ancestral privilege of being on the land in which they inhabited. So a land acknowledgement, we say Ashe.
Ashe.
So with that, I think that I actually have to say a few words now. We give thanks for all of you joining us today. Thank you, Asali, Divine Ecclesiastes, our Chief Creative Officer, our Cultural Warrior, our Mama, our Finger Wagger, all of the above. Losing Louisiana Land, People, and Culture was the brainchild of Asali. And with the help of the team at Ashe, we're able to put on a week-long series of discussions, film screenings, and really just challenging ourselves to be more conscious about our climate, and its effects upon how we view the world and how we live in this great state of Louisiana. Today's panel is titled Where You At? Climate, Equity, and Culture, a roundtable discussion. It'll be moderated by the phenomenal Monique Harden, the Deep South Center for Environmental Justice, and some members of the Climate Action Equity Project Advisory Group, who are D.D. Green, Holly Grove Neighbors Association, Dawn Hebert, East New Orleans Neighborhood Advisory Commission, Chuck Morris, Brother Chuck Morris from Thrive New Orleans, Cesspool 5, local representative of the Hip Hop Caucus and rap artist from Nothing But Fire Records, Arsene DeLay, local organizer for Get Out Your Brass and Vote, as well as an urban gardener, healer, event vocalist, and band leader, and our dear, dear, dear brother T. Tyrone Henry, I'm sorry. We call him Brother T, who is a local New Orleans urban farmer, entrepreneur, founder of Bishop Breeze, a hibiscus tea company, as well as a master drummer here in our city. So with that, I will turn the reins over to Ms. Monique Harden.
Hey, thank you, Wood. I appreciate that. Well, greetings and good morning to everyone. I want to say that this is the first time I think we've had a conversation among ourselves around what community building work, culture, arts have to do with climate and racial equity. And I would say everything. As Mama Jamila said on yesterday's Zoom session as part of this Climate Action Week, that if we lose the land, we lose the people, and if we lose the people, we lose the culture, and there goes our humanity. And so New Orleans is in a climate crisis, we know that, but long before the climate crisis, we've had and have been dealing with and struggling to overcome tremendous racial inequity. And so what the Deep South Center for Environmental Justice, which is founded by Dr. Beverly Wright, our executive director, wanted to do was not have a situation where policies and issues that direct us and how we live are kind of outside of our solution, the ways in which we can bear and give solution to that, and do that in a way that builds and supports our communities and culture. And so with that in mind, we had put together, in partnership with the City of New Orleans, Mayor Cantrell, and the Greater New Orleans Foundation, reaching out to community-based organizations in Algiers, Holly Grove, East New Orleans, Lower Nine, Central City, and Gentilly to bring their members into a conversation with the likes of Chuck Morris, Logan Burke, Liz Davey, and Alex Pazorski around how we can reduce the amount of greenhouse gas emissions coming out of our city, but do it in a way that actually changes and achieves equity in our city. So doing both together. These are opportunities as we deal with energy. How can we do it in a way that brings the bills down? How can we do it in a way that allows people in neighborhoods to generate their own electricity and kind of get out of that burden that we have? Or how do we make transportation and getting around the city easier while we're lowering that pollution as well? So that's the kind of stuff that we did. And I'm going to put in the chat link a report by the advisory group. But what we wanted to do today, and as part of the recommendations that came out of that, is how do we build a culture of awareness and practice in terms of the community building that's needed in this climate crisis we have. So this is our first conversation. And I'm just so pleased to have CES45 Brother T and Arsene here to be a part and help in fusing the work that y'all have done and acknowledge that you, Brother Wood, and Asali into this conversation that's, I think, very much needed. And how do we build that out throughout the city would be an important goal to go with. So how would y'all like to get started? I have an opening question I wanted to pose, and maybe folks can just kind of give their responses to it. Does that make sense? So I would like to know, like, how do you define culture? What does culture mean to you?
I jump in. For me, culture is just what, as far as like our city, right? It's the traditions that was before us that we were raised in and we grew up in. So, like I grew up in, the Lord Ninth, not the Lord Ninth Ward of Desire, but the Ninth Ward. And, like we got a lot of, traditions that just was before me that I was able to grow up and embrace and love. And I call it, the culture. And so when things happen, of course, like, Katrina, different stuff that breaks us away from the culture, we remember those things. That's the that you made us. And I think those are the things that really just, you know, hit home for me. Like all of the traditions that my grandmothers and my uncles and fathers just, you know, passed down. All of the things we get to do in our city that just make it New Orleans. So I think the traditional things is what I would call, you know, the culture.
Hey y'all, it's my name is Arsène Delay, and I think that you know, especially here in New Orleans, it's a different it's a different thing. Culture for me is it's one of the defining expressions that is born of the indigenous practices and the indigenous people here. You know, I'm 13th generation New Orleanian and can trace it that far back. And our those cultural practices is what gives us an identity well, I mean, and especially for me, that it is a defining identity that that is so important, especially coming from an ancestral line where our identity was taken from us. So, you know, I mean, to be, I'm trying to remember who said it, but it's like to be Black in America is to not necessarily know your past. And for, you know, us from New Orleans, there's a very, very strong identity that we hold on to, that we also keep alive. And it is literally born of the ground up here. It's not something that is it wasn't something that was necessarily put upon us. This was something that we grew ourselves, even in the face of epic levels of oppression. So I mean, culture is an identity for us, and it is something that is so it's so rich and so desirable that they'll even put an economy behind it, you know, and want to sell it. But at the end of the day, regardless of that, before you know, we put it in economic terms, it's still something that is born of us, regardless of who's watching.
Agreed. Yeah. I think, you know, to call yourself a New Orleans artist means that you are New Orleanian. It means that you live and breathe art and culture. It's the soundtrack to our lives. It's the tone of our existence. It speaks to the history in us and the legacy and the lineage and the roots of our neighborhoods. You know, to live in New Orleans is to plan your life around on second lines and Super Sundays and festivals, and to open your window and discover that, you know, someone has passed on, because the music says that, you know, we're listening to the ancestors. You know, it's to have this intimate relationship with culture and music and rhythm. Sometimes when folks from New Orleans, we sometimes walk to the beat that only we can hear, right? Other folks understand it, and they're drawn to it. We are a magical, mystical, musical place where we sing and dance because, not only because it's beautiful, but because it's necessary. And it's every bit of who we are as New Orleanians. So I think that's what culture means.
Other folks want to chime in? Folks from the advisory group, Dee Dee, Chuck, Dawn.
Well,
What does culture mean to you?
And I can't see the name of the first speaker, but culture is really what
That was Sus 45 was the very first speaker.
Sus 45. Okay. You know, it's what you grew up with. Now, I personally grew up in a Lafitte housing project. So we had a culture for Mardi Gras. We would walk to the French Quarter, you know, for the parades. We had the second line. You know, we had Dookie Chase. We go get all those sandwiches. In fact, if you've never had a French fry po' boy sandwich, you don't know what you're missing. So, but we do have a culture, you know, within our family, you know, and as I believe New Orleanians, we take in other people and call them family. You know, this is what we do, and we protect them. and it's really just a great thing. Now, I will admit that since Katrina, you know, some things have had to change, and we don't have the closeness, you know, like we used to have, because all families used to live close to each other. But hopefully, you know, that will all change. And where I live in New Orleans East, you know, we don't have the parades. You know, we live really far from, well, not really far, but we're not really close to each other. But we still try to keep that culture, what we grew up with, you know, amongst ourselves, and share it, you know, with our new friends and families that we come in contact with.
Thank you. And you know, one of the things that I think Brother T said that I can really resonate with is the culture is a soundtrack to our lives. And when you really think about what that truly means, is that it is the rhythm of the beat. It is who we are. It's how we move and how we have our way. The culture here is what makes this city unique from any other city, especially in this country, that's out there. And one of the things about culture also, no matter what your religious traditions are, there's a spiritual nature about this place. And I can't put my finger on it, but that is our unique culture, our mixing and our really coming together, our synthesis of different backgrounds of people and histories in this space from thousands and thousands of years back. That makes this culture so unique and special. And I'm so glad that this committee is really this committee is focused on preserving that culture, even through climate action and all the things that are happening. We cannot kill the song. We cannot kill the song.
Okay. Dee Dee, Brother T, do y'all want to add your thoughts to this?
So as far as thank you, Chuck, for remembering I said that. I forgot I said that, but that's a good summary. And I think it's culture across the world. You know, different people have their own shape, I guess, of what culture is. But speaking about us as folks in this region currently called New Orleans, I still trace it back to something for sure that I know predates New Orleans, because it wasn't the folks that brought us over that encouraged us to do what we do. It had to come from something else, and we all hear it, know how to do it, know how to play it, know how to dance it in a unique kind of way that to me gives evidence that it's something from back. So to me, culture is that rhythm of life, but the way it's expressed here is concentrated. You know, the best way I can say it after traveling a few places, it's concentrated like nowhere else. It's necessary. It's food. You know, so culture, I would say, is definitely our expression of how we live.
Last but not least, Dee Dee Green.
Oh, Monique. Greetings, everybody. And what's up, sis? It's been a long time since I've seen you, brother. I agree wholeheartedly with everything that's been said about culture and how we define it. And I'll just add that I do think it's I believe it's what you inherit. It's the, social rules and contracts and traditions and activities that sort of shape. I agree that it's the stuff that shapes your identity. And I'll also say that it's really hard to destroy, as much as it may change or as it gets co-opted, or all the things, all the adverse impacts that colonialism and history has done to us, our people, and our traditions. I don't think it can be completely destroyed. I think it is it's generational and it's inherited, and it's again something that gets changed and messed with, but I think it is who we are, at the root of who we are as human beings, as Black folks, as folks in New Orleans, as Southerners, as people from the African diaspora. So yeah, I agree with what everyone has said about culture.
So this is really helpful because what I've heard is culture's in our DNA, can't be destroyed. It's who we are. It's identity. It's also place, like the neighborhoods I heard from Lafitte to Desire, right? So it's about the place that we grew up in, raised in, grandmothers I heard, right? So the people who came before us. And that there's something kind of protected around it, right? So as much as people try to mess with it, to use Dee Dee's words, there's something that still remains true and continue on, right? And so as people who now live in a certain part of these United States where hurricanes are way beyond what it used to be with climate change and heat waves and bariatric pressure and migraines and all of those sorts of things, asthma attacks are on the rise. And of course, we're now in this COVID-19 pandemic to boot. What ways do you think the culture that is part of who we are, how do we bring solutions to those kinds of threats to where we live, how we live into our culture, so that more people can not only appreciate where we are and who we are in the city, but also take action around doing better around our health, around our future when it comes to the climate crisis?
Well, I think what we're doing right now is very important because we're being connected to other people like ourselves that we don't really know, but we all have the same mindset and we want to, work on improving the community and helping people. So I think what you're doing with this session right now is something that needs to happen. And, at times it needs to be enlarged, to encompass more people. But I believe this is important because we all, at some point at this moment, and especially with COVID, we need to reach out to people, but we can't, because of the situation. But if we could speak to our, fellow advocates like this, it would, we could all help each other in some way.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Monique and everybody here, I think that the solution is that we must allow our cultural ambassadors to be part of the solution. We must allow our people to be part of the solution. And we must create culture and art around the preservation of our culture, even during these tough times. So what are those things that can build awareness that artists can do and culture bearers can do around the challenges that we have? But the key is that, historically, not historically, I can speak from what I've seen, is that we have brought people from elsewhere to help us and be the savior. I would love to see that as we think about solutions, that our cultural bearers and our people are up close and center. They're part of this solution and their voice is heard as it relates to how we solve these challenges that we face.
Well, here's something that I've seen for sure. You're absolutely right in, people coming from elsewhere coming in to try and swoop down and pull the savior moves and everything. And I've I've definitely made enemies calling people out on that because, when they want a participation trophy for attempting to do that, and I holler, why didn't you just ask the actual community? Because there were people who were actually doing this, who were doing the legwork from the get-go, whose voices needed to be amplified. Mm. And I think that is so incredibly important, is that the people who are actually doing the work, they're not getting the they're not getting the amplification on that sense. Also, what I've also seen, experienced, and had conversations about regarding climate crisis and issues is that it's very, very far from people. A lot of folks don't, it seems like this far away concept. And the conversations, just the simple act of bringing it down to how it actually affects them personally seems to break that. I'm heavily involved with WaterWise Gulf South and Healthy Community Services. And when we started like the August, I think it was the August 5th flood 2 or 3 years ago now, when in a matter of 4 hours, we had about 7 inches of rain that came down on the city. And all these places were flooding. And of course, it affected people because people's cars got messed up. People couldn't get home. People couldn't travel to where they needed to go. And it wreaked so much havoc on the city. And so I started from that conversation. I was like, hey, y'all, why don't you think about permeable surfaces? Because if we actually find a way to manage the stormwater, guess what gets protected? Your car. And all of a sudden, and guess who we don't have to rely on? The Sewage and Water Board. And see, those are tangible things that people understand because they directly affect them. Everybody's got a Sewage and Water Board bill that owns a property. Everyone's had to deal with them. And when you really bring it home, it breaks whatever that barrier is, or gives them permission to give themselves the power to address these climate issues.
And when you say permeable surfaces, I know Chuck's heart fluttered a little bit because he's training people in and around the city around how to lay it, how to work with that kind of material as part of landscaping and in neighborhoods throughout the city. Do you want to say a little bit about what that is, just in case folks may not be clear about what is meant?
Sure. So one of the things that we push in our like community classes in regards to stormwater management is the fact that New Orleans has a concrete problem. See, back in the 50s and the 60s and even the 70s, even in my family too. I mean, my grandfather went and concreted the entire back of the house because his knuckleheaded sons didn't want to come over and mow the lawn when he asked them to do it. So he's like, I'm tired of y'all, I'm gonna go ahead and do this. And a lot of people did that. They concreted the front of their houses, they concreted, the backs. There's a lot of concrete issues. But because of that, when that rain is falling down, it doesn't have anywhere to go. It doesn't have an opportunity to go back into our land, which is a sponge. I mean, if we're all living on a swamp, if the sponge gets all dry and crinkly, that's what's causing all the, the sidewalks. It causes the sidewalks, it causes the foundations to crack in the houses, it causes a whole slew of problems. And people just, they just don't know. It's just, they just straight up they don't know it, they don't see it. And when you illuminate that path, and you actually get them to kind of take a closer look, there's this massive aha moment that happens. It's like I started pushing that stuff on my social media pages, and especially afterwards, because I had installed a 300-gallon water garden in my front yard. And during those massive rain events, I go out there with a camera and I'm like, see where the water is right now. And then 30 minutes later, see where the water is right here. This is 2.5 inches. Now it's all the way in the ground. And then I use that to, and then I tell them, like, this is what our sewage system is able to move. And we have one of the most high-end drainage systems in the world. And even though people don't necessarily believe that because of the lack of, its lack of efficacy at the moment, they're like, that's insane. I'm like, no, what you don't understand is that the rain is falling at a faster rate now. Like, this hasn't changed. We're actually in the midst of a climate crisis. And, when you see the words climate crisis on a television, it's this thing that it's not something that you necessarily they don't show you the things in your neighborhood. They're showing you, you know, the drastic stuff that tugs at your heart emotions that are not necessarily happening right here, right now in our neighborhoods.
If I could say
So,
something, Monique, one of the things that I wholeheartedly agree with Sister Delay. Is it spell? Is it going to pronounce the delay?
yes, sir.
Yeah, and the key is that, you know, as we train and it's the National Disaster Resilience operator for the city, we are embracing people of color, ex-offenders, those sorts of folks, the people that are part of the culture, to be part of the solution, training them on how to do the things that she just spoke about. So again, I go back to the fact that we have to involve our culture in the change, the 2 C's, the change the culture. People got to be involved. One of the things, and I don't know if we're going to get to this, I'm not sure how long we're going to be talking today, but what I'm concerned about and what I've seen is once there's been change and people get it and understand it, I've seen some neighborhoods where the price of the value of their properties go up, and it causes gentrification. So we got to make sure that we improve and do all these great things, but we also got to make sure that we understand that we still need to own our property. We still need to be part of that process, because we can improve ourselves out of our spaces. So I've seen that personally, and we must be cognizant of that.
Thank you, Chuck. I see you nodding, Wood.
Yeah, Chuck, you hit it right on the head. That was going to be my point, that this has to be a multi-layered conversation, because we, you know, these neighborhoods, right? We talked about the culture of our neighborhoods, these natural incubators of culture. And we are at the point where, you know, will the conditions and circumstances continue to exist for the next Cesspool 5, for the next Brother T, for the next Trombone Shorty, right? Because as these neighborhoods change, you know, these conversations around culture and climate have to go hand in hand, because we won't have those folks to understand. I mean, listen, we know that the systemic racism and, you know, systemic oppression has been the pandemic that folks of color and Black folks in particular have been dealing with their entire existence. So as we come with every crisis, the folks who are in low-income neighborhoods, you know, are most susceptible to storm impacts. Those folks don't have the means to be able to, you know, relocate to safer areas. Poor families are less, you know, insulated than economic shocks and all that kind of good stuff that these conversations talk about. But what does that mean for the actual people in the neighborhoods? So you have to have the culture bearers who are trusted, you know, whether we talking about healthcare, whether we talking about climate change, these folks are trusted, and some of these industries are not trusted. You know, folks in certain communities don't trust the healthcare system. They don't understand climate change. They don't understand how it affects them on a really personal level. So the culture bearers should be used to be able to go into these neighborhoods where they are trusted. But we also have to make sure, as you said, Chuck, that they're still there.
Yes.
Because if the neighborhoods continue to change, then, you know, my next door neighbor who plays tuba on Saturday, just because if he's no longer there for me to have that culture, he gets priced out of his house, then I'm next and next and next, you know. So yeah, I think these conversations have to go hand in hand. We definitely have to be able to train culture bearers to be climate advocates, to be healthcare facilitators, to be all these different things that they could expand their capacity. Because as we know, they also are the golden goose that lays the golden egg, and nobody feeds the goose. Right. So what if we fed the goose? You know, what would our culture look like then? What would our understanding around these topics be then?
You absolutely hit the nail on the head. No, go ahead. This is the exact thing that I constantly am pushing every time I have to go holler at everybody at City Hall. And I'm like, you know, y'all want to be quick to put us on a billboard, but what would it look like if we were actually supported? Because remember, we're the ones who actually create that. And y'all want to talk about a cultural economy all the time, but on paper, remember that those of us who are the actual musicians and culture bearers and stuff of this city, I know we're not a line item because you don't give us any money. We actually take that cost ourselves. I tell them, go ahead.
Well, I think this is really important because this whole issue of exclusion is also multi-layered, right? From policy, budgeting, resources that are here in the city. And then you also have this side road twinned with that is displacement one way or another. We've seen the most significant displacement after Hurricane Katrina. And the ways in which people were pushed out of housing projects, how that went into renters, anyone with Section 8 support, anyone who needed maybe family members that was part of a set, right? That's now fractured and moved around, and now they need more help than they're out. And so that displacement piece, like how can culture resist that, right? How can we prevent that from happening again? And how do we do that in a way that makes our community stronger, right? At the end of the day, more solid at the end of the day, because I'm assessed, that's where I met you, was in the post-Katrina fighting against the ways in which people were being pushed out of their neighborhoods and their homes. The so-called, we're fighting for the right to return as a human right and take back the land. And Dawn, where you are in New Orleans East, you've been seeing the ways in which folks have been pushed out of neighborhoods and crammed into spaces that don't really meet their basic needs. And so folks are having to cope and deal with that. So that displacement is a major factor that we're already dealing with that reality. We don't have to imagine it, right? It's happened. And there's nothing right now that I see that prevents it from happening again. So how can culture be part of resisting that?
But
One of the things I would say is that, I'm sorry, Dawn, I'll definitely defer to you for sure.
but we haven't talked about the children, and the school systems. What are they teaching our kids about their culture, in New Orleans? Because a lot of the teachers, from what I understand, and I don't have any small kids or grandkids yet, or in the school system, but what are they doing? Are we, or is the city actually enforcing some type of cultural class, for these children?
I think Dawn froze.
Because
everybody frozen.
Yeah.
If you think everybody is frozen, that means you have.
Oh.
I think you're back.
He's back.
I'm sorry, Dawn.
Oh, that's so what is being taught to these kids, about where they live, where they come from? That's something that we need to, take into account, because I believe none of it is being taught in the school system. Some of you may know differently, and I would really like to know, if something is being done to address that issue.
Isn't the school system, isn't it all chartered now?
Yeah, it is.
That's what my understanding was. Mm-hmm. And that was, when I found that out, that was a major red flag for me. Mm-hmm. So I was like, wait a minute. So there's no actual through line here. And basically what we have now is an entire system of miniature businesses, because charter schools are for profit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I would also say that not only the super red flag of not like I said, making the conditions continue to exist for culture to grow and for our legacy to be carried on, but also this conversation that we're having. My son and I have conversations around that Louisiana is the most flood prone state in the union, right? And that in the next 25, 30 years, he may have to think about living somewhere else if we don't, have conversations around fixing these issues. Because the sea level is rising. As you said, the heat is coming. We had more dangerous days in the past couple of years than I can remember. And then, of course, this year, we had 30-something named storms, like a record. So we're having these conversations because he's having to be off of school extra days because we got multiple hurricanes coming for us. But I don't know if they're teaching, those lessons inside the school that they have to really be concerned about what's going on with our state and what's happening with the amount of land loss. I think, he and I sat down and read an article that was something around every 30 minutes, we're losing a football-sized field of land or something. It was something incredible that even his 10-year-old mind was like, whoa, that's like if I had football fields off my whole street are gone, I'm not gonna have a street. So, we have to have those conversations, I think, with our children, but you're right, that the school system and these charter schools, they have to teach that as well.
I want to say also, we cannot aid and abet we can't be part of our own problem. What I mean by that is that we have to, organizations like ours, we've got to make sure that we are not doing something that's gentrifying. That we can't be going into communities and building up areas of majority culture who are getting these grants or wherever they're getting to do stormwater management or whatever they're getting. We are, and Monique, I just take my hat off to you because of this group, we should be looking at how do we get into neighborhoods that are underserved, that don't have the means to be able to put in green infrastructure, rain gardens, bioswales, whatever you call it, or solar or whatever else to help increase their property value. One of the things I've seen personally is I've seen neighborhoods who have been gentrified become minority neighborhoods, and now they're trying to get rid of or press hard on African American homeowners who don't see the green infrastructure picture the way they see it, and saying that you're not good stewards in the neighborhood because here I am, I got pervious pavement, permeable pavement, I got bioswales and rain gardens, but you don't have it, so you are part of the problem. So we have to figure out how to get past that. Even churches in communities where people are saying, you're a Black church, you've been 100 years, I don't care. You are now in our neighborhood. Now you know they're just getting there. You're now in our neighborhood, so you ain't a good steward. So we don't want you here anymore. We think your church is a detriment to our community. So we must figure out how we can come together and help build up neighborhoods that have been underserved to make sure that they can also get some of these same instruments and things needed for stormwater management, enhance their property values, but not kick them out, but just enhance their property value so they can have more value in their properties, because it is happening every single day.
Here's let me speak on that for a second. This is where there are communities, or there are organizations that are doing exactly the things that you just spoke on. The Greater Tremay Consortium, Waterwise Gulf South, Healthy Community Services, how they do it is, and how we do it, because I'm part of that, is we offer first we offer the education. We offer the education on the environmental stuff, on stormwater water management, free of charge. Before the pandemic, we were having classes on Saturdays or evening presentations. Now we have actually gone virtual, and you can, all you have to do is register. All of it is completely free of charge. We give you the education. You have to attend a certain amount of the workshops to become a certified neighborhood champion. When you're a certified neighborhood champion, we as a collective, when I did that water garden in the front of my house, that was all of us together. That was neighborhood. That's with my neighbors helping me, my friends helping out, and that was the crew from Waterwise Gulf South. We collectively did that together. We've also done partnerships with the Front Yard Initiative, and they help with the grant process. As far as the biggest cost is always removing the concrete, because we're really trying to undo something. So the thing is in that process of getting people involved and talking to the neighbors, that's how you build the accessibility of it. That's how it becomes accessible. Like even in my block, I went and had conversations. My neighbors came out and started asking me what was going on, what I was doing. And they're like, oh, I'm really interested in that. I said, cool. And I gave them the information. And so now all of us are actually talking about redoing a French drain on one side of the street, because all of us have come to a consensus that we are actually trying to restore the drainage abilities on that side of the street to what they were when everybody else was kids and when my parents were kids, so that we can actually get the water to move to the storm drain, and also have an area to create a holding area to actually get some of that water back into the ground. But the thing is, I think that most importantly is how we do that is we have to talk to each other. We have to reach out, and we have to open those lines of communication, because most people tend to get defensive when they're not asked or talked to about something. But I think first and foremost, the communication is the biggest part of getting those kinds of things done, and offering the education free of charge. That is how I feel like that is a very strong way to reach an underserved community, and to not go in with any kind of to not necessarily go in with any kind of preconceived notions. Because even, Angela Chalk, I next time make sure that definitely reach out to her. She's doing amazing work
Yes.
over there on Dual Street. I mean, a prime example of an entire neighborhood effort of the storm drains, the bioswales. I mean, she taught me everything that I know about that. And I mean, even the first day of lockdown, we were on Dual Street creating a tree line for our our community of elders, and the elders were standing by the door. I mean, normally they'd be outside on the porch, but it was COVID, and so they stayed behind doors. But the beautiful thing was that we were planting the seeds so they could have a tree line, so they could have shade, and we could deal with the heat island effect issues that plague communities of color here in New Orleans.
And I think I think that could the artists do something around this work, whatever this looks like? Could they draw, visual artists? I mean, can there be some art campaign around this where the art is part of the overall process? Because I think that would be very, very helpful and would really pique the curiosity of our people and from our cultural bears. I'd love to see something like that take place. And the other cities are doing it as it relates to artists being more involved in this environmental climate action movement.
Yeah, I think they have to be, Chuck. I think like I said, I think you hit it on the head with your comments earlier. I think the artists have to be a part of this movement, but I also think that there's an opportunity here to increase artists' capacity by having them be trained in some way, shape, or form to be climate activists, right?
And resourced.
Yeah, right, and oh, most definitely, as an artist, most definitely resource. In the capacity to be able to, I mean, it's Nina Simone who said it's an artist's duty to reflect the times, right? So,
oh, wow.
So, we as artists, we understand what's going on, but the more information, the more data we have, because we're the kind of folks that take and move folks from one side of their brain to the other. So we can take all that data and turn it in, and from plucking your head strings to your heartstrings. And I think when more folks are, have their heart into this movement and understand, because nobody wants to see folks on their roofs again. We remember those pictures are visceral. Some of us who, like myself, who did not leave, like those stories are still with me. They'll be with me forever. So, I did have to write about it. I did have to make music about, my Katrina experience. So, if we get the information, I think artists, and I don't want to speak for all artists on here, but I know Brother T and Brother Seth, can will make music that will speak to this movement.
Yeah.
But T, you want to chime in? No pun intended. T nodding.
So just for me, I've been here, but I've been respecting and enjoying the conversation. But like I think like we have to stop preaching to the choir if we want the community involved in climate change, climate justice, and stuff like that. Like, because the community need the successful information from the people who have the information. So all of the organizations, they have to like reach the people instead of just reaching their networks. And like I never knew about climate change before I started doing organizing work. And like Will said, like if we utilize the artists, and like Chuck said, even commissioning some artwork, what I'm saying? So the organizations who getting the funding for this work, they have to spend some of that money with the artists for one, but also get that information to the community so that we see ourselves. So like Ms. DeLay say, when it's flooding in the community, like that's when people realize what climate change is, when they're being affected by it. But no one is having the conversation, with the community to inform them of, just the climate, issues. And so, like, if we don't tap in to the community and like really be able to make them aware of it, they're not going to be involved and participate. And also, we got to do some of the things that, people doing in other communities. Because I remember being on a call and like just talking about simple things as recycling. We don't have those recycle bins that they have in Jefferson Parish, just some of the smaller things. So we, like, a lot of the people in our city and community, they get SNAP benefits and that they hundreds of bottles of water and cold drinks and different stuff, all kind of plastic items and stuff. And we're not even recycling, doing, some of the small things. So to be informed is so important, because when we see ourselves in the issue, more people will play a role in the solution.
Excellent.
What would be some of the first steps you would take? Not first steps, but like continued steps on that. What would you recommend folks do to be more, to make that connection, to have that kind of community, community building work around this, working with people?
Well, like, I think it was, I'm not sure if it was Ms. Dawn or Ms. DeLay who shared, like, you have to touch, you got to touch the people for one, but all of the different organizations, they work with each other, and some of the people who doing the work on the ground, we not tapping into those people. Like, you don't have to reinvent the wheel, because people are doing the work, but they aren't the ones that's looking for the grants, know how to get the grants, and so they doing the work. So we gotta touch the people that's doing the work for one, but then pour into them and invest in them with the resources, like you were saying earlier. But use the people in our culture, use the phenomenons of our culture, like the second lines, all of the different things that we have. Like, you got to utilize that to get the information out to the people. And once you utilize the culture, all in the culture bearers, like, it'll be a whole lot easier. Like I said, just like breaking the intergenerational gap, right? When you take a panel like this that's multi-generational and take these informationals and make them multi-generational. And so you have a lot of people who are, middle age, a little older in these organizations, but they don't have the younger folks in the organization, or if they do, they don't have a voice. And so you got to tap into that generation, because they are the younger people who's growing up and gonna have the responsibility. And then they're the voters who need the knowledge from the older generation to share it with our community. And like I said, the communities have to recognize that they are affected by the issue. And as of, right now, people don't see that climate change is something that affects our community. It's kind of like trying to get somebody to buy life insurance, and they like, well, I'm gonna need that later on. But you don't know when it's gonna, something gonna happen to you, and you think you can wait, but you need it now, so it don't be a burden on your family members, and it's too late once something happens. So we just gotta be proactive and share that successful information and pour into the people that's already doing the work.
I guess I want to comment on that, because, and that's very important, what you said, but what's discouraging to me is that we, in my community, fought this energy gas plant. And we had over 100 people going down to City Hall speaking against it. And it was still passed by the City Council. So I don't think that we get the support that we need regarding climate change, from our elected officials, I'll put it that way. And I do believe that more people need to learn about, climate change and what they can do. Because in the East, I understand that not as many people have the recycle bins. And that's an easy thing to do. But what is it going to take to have them get the bins and use it? So it is an educational issue. And it's, again, I think that we need more support from our elected officials.
Brother
I
T,
agree. Oh, go ahead.
oh, sorry. I was just gonna say, Brother T or Didi, I was just wondering if y'all wanted to share any thoughts, what you've heard so far.
Sure. Everything that I've heard, I
Yeah.
agree. I think we need it all, from the local cultural concept of New Orleans, being the parameters, I guess, of how we're speaking about culture, as far as politicians, whatever they're able to do, or actually or were even designed to do. So when I hear things like, we need more support from the powers, I guess that be, I'm kind of about as patient as I can be on that note, but not really dependent on it, because I don't think it ever was really designed for us to be catered to, educational wise, health wise, anything. So anything that's going to happen, I think, as we're talking about it, the word I keep hearing is that we need to. So that sounds like, a form of unity. We need to come together and also recall, when it's dealing with education, that they brought us over here because of what we knew already. So we've had, as far as I know, the longest relationship with nature. And I don't think it's really a climate crisis. The climate is Mother Nature. She's cool, however it comes. And as far as our ability, the crisis would be that we're not aware or sensitive as we used to be, to know what to do and when to do and how to do it, without depending on the folks who have, capitalized off our knowledge already. So I think it's a level of awareness and maybe an awakening curve that we need to kind of see if we can wake up at the same time, petition for support, and do all these things at the same time. But as far as the urgency of how much we don't know and how much we need to know not to be hit hard or impacted in a negative way by nature, to me, is going to depend on the nature that's in our culture, of us being connected with nature, of us knowing the earth again, knowing how to deal with the major four elements, and not necessarily who can really show us how to do this. We showed them how to do this. And I don't know how to blink and make that happen, but I do know connecting with the earth, more of that. So connecting with the old folks who just know the earth. They may not have an organization, they may not have a book written on it, but they can tell you how the sun rises and falls, or how the earth moves, and they just know things. And that type of education, innate education, or cultural things that's in our DNA, I think would be to our advantage overall, New Orleans and anywhere else that we seem to be on the opposite end of the benefits, I guess, of being in any city. That's New Orleans, that's other, like I say, other states, other countries, that I can see this global, they call it climate crisis. But we're definitely not going to be able to change it, but how to live with it, I think is going to depend on our awareness and ability to be sensitive to nature. And if we, as far as I know, are the oldest folks, or come from the oldest folks on the planet, I think we have that as an advantage, that we can tap into that root, that we've been dealing with nature for the longest. Out of all the humans, that we've been human the longest. I don't know if we should depend on the folks who just showed up on the scene.
Well, I think there's something to that. And what you're saying, Brother T, I want to share the data point in terms of some research, which is Black folks overall contribute the least to climate change, but we are the most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, and least likely to have that recovery to where we were in the event of like a major hurricane or storm situation. And so that having the least contribution to it, I think goes to what you were saying about knowing how to live in nature, right? Live, on this planet and in harmony with it, not, destroying it or exploiting it or extracting from it, polluting it, right? And so I think that adds to that in terms of that, what does that mean in terms of our, how can we express that culturally around doing things right? Because if we've got too many people who we share the planet with who are polluting the heck out of it, right? And that's affecting us more than others. And so that feels like, that adds to like a level of, just for our own survival to be able to say, there's a different way. We got to be in harmony with what God has given us on this planet and not be destroying it. And how do we do that? And I think, what you were saying, Arsene, about, living differently, even within that little square, lot of land where the house is, that is an opportunity where you can live with and in nature and not against it. Get that concrete up, let that water flow into the soil and replenish that water and that moisture, and all of those are, and what Seth was saying too about connecting with people who are already doing the work and getting support and building that out, right? And being able to learn from folks who are doing the work already, but doing it, with maybe not, they're not going after grants or anything like that, but they see the need, it's in them, and this is what they're doing. And I was just wanted to check in with y'all about how do we build this out, right? This is we're really up against some major stuff, right? We have the most unique culture in this country. It's not replaceable. There's no other New Orleans or type of Houston tried, Atlanta can try a little bit here and there, right? But that's with our people who've been displaced, right? So that's our, our little satellite New Orleans hubs, if you know what I mean. But what we have here is like really unique. I've traveled around in lots of other countries, and there's no other place I want to live but here. There's just something, I can't even put words to it. It's just the way it makes me feel. And so how do we hold on to that in a way that deals with things that kind of are really threatening to, displace us, right? And so how do we build out this knowledge and this concern and these recommendations and these ideas that are flowing from this conversation? Where do we go from here? What would be some things that we could do to build out, to amplify those voices? I heard that being said by some folks.
I don't, oh, who was that? Who that is?
Dee Dee, I think, wants to, then Dee Dee, then Arsene, then I think Seth.
Yeah.
Yeah, go Dee Dee. Go ahead, Dee Dee.
People have been saying things and I'm like, yeah. I've been trying to chime in just because just an amen moment or a bunch of amen moments. I just wanted to say this is probably a little lofty and not the most practical response to your question, Monique, but just thinking about like how I mentioned earlier, how like culture can be co-opted and appropriated, knowledge can be too. Like, I feel like this is a story I often tell. There's so many people from my circle of, I'll say, friends and family, when you hear about climate and resilience and stuff, there are people who still believe that's a very white issue and that it's not our issue. But as Monique mentioned, like when a crisis happens, and others have mentioned, we're impacted in a major way, not like other communities are. And so I think that knowledge and language can be co-opted as well. Like we let someone else control the narrative. And the story I often tell is, this is a very simple example, but it's one that really resonates well. My grandmother, when I was a kid, and even to this day, my grandmother washed plastic and foil and reused materials that many of us just discard regularly. And it wasn't so much about saving the planet, but it was about just being practical. Like, why would you discard something that you could use again? That doesn't make a lot of sense. And I always think about her when I'm in these conversations, because I know she doesn't that's not, promoting climate resilience or
She's not being
mitigation measures.
eco-conscious.
No, that's not language. That's not language that resonates with her. But I think that it's our responsibility. I'm hearing people talk about sharing knowledge and just reclaiming the information that is already, we talked about culture being a part of our DNA and stuff. Like, our people know, I think when Brother T was talking about us being, being related to people who have been on this planet for the longest, like, this is stuff that we know that it may take some relearning, but we can reclaim it like it's ours. And the way we share that information doesn't have to be the way it's being shared or the way the narrative is being controlled. And so I just think, like I said, this is really a practical response, but just one of the things we do in Holly Grove, Piece by Piece New Orleans hosts a free summer camp for kids, and the neighborhood history is a really important part of what we address in the summer program. The camp is related to the garden space in the neighborhood, but we talk about learning that probably challenges their traditional education, the stuff that is not being talked about in a public school setting. So I think very simply, I'm saying that kind of in jest, we need to reclaim language and information and knowledge about what inherently, like, we already know. And I always use that recycling story as a very simple example, because again, it's not language that resonates with my grandmother, but when I talk, if I talk about climate to her right now, she might be like, what are you talking about? But very early, as a young girl, that's kind of where I understood, like, everything doesn't have to be discarded. Things you can reuse, materials, you don't have to waste them and throw them away. So I just wanted to, big up everything everybody's saying, but I wanted to just kind of add that, like, reclaiming land and taking back the stuff we already know and that belongs to us.
Monique,
Thank you,
I'll
Dee.
share and I'll leave it at that because I got to jump off in a little bit. But I'd love to figure out how can we take the artist and leverage the artists that we have to create artwork to educate. Whatever your art form is, to educate. How do we take that? Because we can talk and we got this committee and we can do all this stuff, but a lot of the times the things that resonate with our people is our cultural bearers and their artwork. And whatever that is, how do we create an art program around climate action? And how do we leverage our artists to be able to communicate what we're trying to communicate during the work that we're doing on this panel? But how can the artists do that through their forms of art? That to me would be, that would help education in a way and get people involved in this movement and help really, as we think about the recommendation about our artists and culture bearers, that would really be a way of change and education and awareness that we can't, I know Dawn's great and you're great. Everybody around our community is wonderful, but they have a connection that we don't have. And how can they leverage their art form to get the message out to the people we're trying to touch that we can't touch the way we get touched?
Well, I think there's,
I can sing a little bit, but not that great. So
I think there's I think we need to take a multi-pronged approach to it. Just like at the beginning of this pandemic, how all of a sudden you started seeing all of these ads on the advocating of mask wearing. There needs to be a PR campaign in regards to the importance of undoing the harm, about getting back to the ground, getting back to the soil. So we can go to our production companies and have them doing PSAs in regards to this. We could go to people like Studio B and like Mike Odoms and stuff, and having him incorporate that to him. I actually, I'm also a masking baby doll, and something that the conversation that I have had with my crew is How about we come out in suits that are made from recycled things? Because those kinds of art installations and that kind of stuff brings awareness. When I have an umbrella that's got an entire design of recycled spoons, people pay attention to that kind of a thing, and those kinds of things get boosted. We can go to you can go and we can have these conversations with the chiefs. I mean, there's several of them that I've had these environmental conversations with, and they can start putting that into panels on their suits to bringing awareness that way. Also, even on, you know, something that Brother T said that it was so, that resonated with me so well. It's so trying to go at this from the bureaucratic level is exhausting, to put it lightly, but it's still necessary work. And we have to encourage people who have that kind of voice, who are fearless in being able to speak to them and reminding them that, you know, for all the times that they attempt to bleach culture out of the code, that that's not going to happen, that they can't, that they shouldn't be doing that. That is a really shoddy practice, and people have been doing that. But we need to encourage more people to continue that fight and to continue to reach out to council people. And if they don't want to listen, then we need to reach out to our networks and put somebody in there who is going to listen to us. But I know that the bureaucratic side of it always takes the longest, because the system was designed in oppression. And that's a whole nother story that we don't need to get into, because all of us have an idea or know the history on that. But it's still a valid prong that that's still a beast that needs to be poked continuously. But I think, you know, all we have to, you know, artists, you know, writing verses about this kind of a thing, all of those things are incredibly important. All of those things are doable and are in the processes of being done. But I also think that, you know, Dee Dee, you made a great point about reclamation, about reclaiming things. And I love that recycling story, because it reminds me, when my grandmother passed, I took over hosting Thanksgiving, which is like normally, not this year, but is normally a huge big to do. And I'll never forget the first time the family came over, and I had glass. I did not put out paper plates. I had cloth napkins, and they're like, "Oh, you so fun." And I had to remind them, like, "Oh, you're so fun. Look at you." And they're just like, "Why are you doing this?" And I mean, and I stayed the entire time at that sink, rewashing dishes and drying, so they were always back in supply. But they all sat there and made fun of me until I reminded them. I said, "What did Mama do? Like, Mama didn't have all of that. She, like, y'all didn't grow up with all of that. You went and washed the dish and then you went and reused it." Because to me, the culture is, my culture is not disposable. And when I see the amount of garbage and trash that goes, that ends up on the curb after, after big holiday, gatherings and stuff like that, I was like, no, like, we need to get back to some of those practices that our elders use. It's like, no, they reuse those things. And not only was it, to honor the actual object and to take care of the things you had, but also in doing that, in honoring this, in honoring the things that you had, you're also actually helping the environment in doing that. All right, I'm off my soapbox.
Appreciate it. I see that Asali has in the chat box. She loved the idea that I think Chuck was been pushing, which is the idea of commissioning songs, murals, suits, parade, Mardi Gras Indian suits, the whole nine. So thank you, Asali, for that. I know that this is a live feed on Facebook, so Wood and folks at Ashe, if there are questions that are coming in, or if there's some other kind of space or pipeline where y'all might be, where folks are commenting or having questions. I don't want to exclude those. I just can't access to see if there are any. Okay, we don't have any questions. Okay.
Morgan Melinda is monitoring that, so I think she can chime in if we have anything.
She just did. Thank you. So so if we were to commission the whole 9 around arts and culture bearers, what would you want to see in it? What would it need to have besides lots of money? We know it needs to have lots of money. But besides that, what would it need to have to be right?
I think it'd be, it needs to be a series of campaigns, layered campaigns that's around not only, climate change, but cultural preservation. I could see Seth, on stage in front of a couple of thousand people, you know what I'm saying, talking to them about this issue and them actually listening to him because he's Seth 45. And even if there was some kind of petition they needed to sign, and everybody could pull out their phones. I've seen him do this, where he make everybody pull out their phones and do something on the app that, that could really, have a lot of voices at one time, and then, like I said, when outside do open back up, when we having our second lines and our Super Sundays, then, the recycling bins could be out there. We make it important to folks that, if you got something, don't throw it on the ground, put it in this place and do it at your home. And also, like make some of these campaigns really tangible to our folks, like right in their faces where they are. And then, we can get to the music, we can get to the poetry, we can get to the murals and all those different places. And because our communities need that art anyway. We know a lot of communities. We were talking about doing a mural for Mac, in his home space. You know what I'm saying? Like around the corner from where he is, where the children who know him and grew up him can see him be on the space. And I do a side just said biodegradable Mardi Gras beads. Oh yeah. So I mean, all those kind of things that do cost money but are within our reach. And then definitely, I know between some of us on this panel, we have a stable of artists that would be interested in this because it affects them and they understand it.
Other thoughts on what would you like to see in it?
I just agree with Wood in terms of it being a ongoing campaign, right? It's not just about commissioning, the art one time and then that's it. You know what I'm saying? So it's like this have to be an ongoing campaign. So this is just one tool in the arsenal. You know what I'm saying? So you got to still do all the work that everyone is already doing, but utilize the artists and give them the information. So because like is a form of music and that I use, and as far as from a hip hop aspect, like I can take the information and put it in words that people can resonate in and use our culture in terms of our slang and the words that we use and make it feel good and it not be, like preachy, whatever. I can put it in the words that people is gonna be like a song, and right, and a lot of artists can do that, even visual art as well. And so thousands of people may get it, you know what I'm saying? But there's thousands of people that won't get it because they were preoccupied during that time, but they still need to get it. And so it have to be ongoing, and we have to utilize every tool in the arsenal to get the work done. And so, I just think that wherever we getting these resources from, and when it's time to do the work, it's ongoing so that the people, they hear it and they get it.
Also, just to something that Sesh 45 brought to mind was live installations, like live planting installations. There are groups and there are groups of people who are teaching others how to actually forage food walking around New Orleans. And I think that us, when we're doing plantings, if we're planting things that give back, planting lemon trees, avocado trees, plants that produce food that we can eat in the right of way spaces, so that people we'll be addressing not only heat island effect issues and stormwater issues, but we'll also be addressing food security issues, which have become so prevalent, especially right now in this pandemic. I think that us educating, advocating in the schools for learning how to garden and how to work with the soil is an important thing, because when people are able to grow their own stuff, I mean, it's a complete and utter game changer. But I think also in teaching the youngins about our history of how Black farmers were literally like scooted out of the entire agricultural area, even though we were the ones who had the information. I think that knowing that and trying to educating them to dismantle the ongoing effects of colonialism will also, like, if we start pushing that, those are also things that's something that can also be ongoing and inspiring.
Brother T, you have some thoughts?
Sure. For one, yes, and I checked everything that I've heard. I have a space that I've been working on. The non-colonialized name of it is Ileo Sign. The colonialized version of it is the Ecological Epicenter of New Orleans. And it's pretty much a small space, about an acre, but the intention of the space is kind of what we're speaking about right now, a place that either things can be either brought to either received, or you can bring information on agricultural. Ideally, I've been in connection with African diaspora, traditional and present, and even future ideas. So working with folks from the Congo, from Belize, from Trinidad, Colombia, folks on how they currently still grow food and how they've retained information from the past. So information that I have to offer, we do seed exchanges, things like that, uses of the different herbs, connection with modern pharmacy or botany on showing the relation between traditional healing and modern medicine, but with African diaspora intentions as the root of why we're doing it. So that's in the Gentilly area, and like I say, a few folks kind of know of it, but it's just been hands-on in an organic kind of way. The neighbors around the community, they kind of see what's happening, and it's kind of growing as it goes. So it's a place where people cutting their grass, I'll just offer them to come and drop their grass cuttings or their shavings, and it's just kind of organically growing into the space. The guys that's making the dumps from the tree cuttings or shavings, this is a dump site where they come and drop off clean landfill. And as I learn information just from folks who know more than me, I just try to compile information. But as a space that a physical space people can come to either bring or receive information, that's being worked on, and I like to share that, with everybody that's on the panel also.
Where is that? Where can people go to see it and experience it, really?
Okay, so the space is at the corner of Havana and St. Denis, right adjacent to Dillard, right there by the canal, 7th Ward area, near the Dillard wetlands. That area I think that the city is working on or have some interest in working on. When they can come see it is when I'm there, because it's pretty much just me and the animals. I got some goats and chickens and things like that that's over there, but just call me. And until it's really set up to where I have folks that can be there, then the hours are when I'm there, or when anytime anybody has any interest of coming to learn or come to teach anything.
that's so we Wood, I was wondering if you had any thoughts.
No, I'm just in mesmeration of Brother T and all his efforts. I definitely think that we have opportunity to, bring some youth over there so they could, get some of this information that you have, Brother T, as well as, be able to put their hands in the dirt and in the soil and understand, actions and the legacy moments that we have with our Mother Earth, as well as with the elders who have instilled this knowledge in you and everybody on this panel, really. Y'all, this whole call and response thing that is uniquely New Orleans. It's not just something that we do in the music and the culture. It's from the stories, that we receive from our elders, the stories that Dee has told, and Arsene has told, is coming down from different generations. As you said, those things last with us, and those things are, those stories are moments that made us who we are, but also, how we are. I think that's what really, always gets me, is that every time somebody tells a story about an elder that didn't have all this technology that we have, that didn't have all these things that's supposed to make life so much better, it seemed like an easier way of life. It seems like, that they were able to receive, organically, a lot of things that we're trying to find now. So sometimes when you gotta have that Sankofa moment when you look back to go forward, So I think, Brother T, I'm in deep appreciation of you occupying that space, my brother, and I definitely have my youngins over there to get their hands in some of that soil and receive some of your truth.
Swing through anytime.
And I was saying, do you want to relay the locations that you and folks like Angela Chalk are moving in this water resilient space in the city?
Sure. We can. So, there's a lot, because we've got we have several sites in Treme and 7th Ward and 9th Ward. We've been going into those neighborhoods. Dual Street, Duals and Epicenter. You can check if you go up Epicenter and turn on Duals, you can see all of the new trees within a good 2.5 block range. There's about 64 trees that we planted all along the on the opposite side of the public right of way sidewalks. There's also right around the corner, there is a big bioswale that spans I think 3 or 4 houses all the way to the storm drains. The 3,000 gallon stormwater planter that's at the Treme Center. They the stormwater planters at Seals Class Act. I have you can catch my rain garden with the I have a rain garden with a kind of a pail catching waterfall thingy, that whole contraption that brings the water from my roof into the garden itself, and that's on Durbandy between Columbus and La Hop Street. And you can also just go to, if you go to Healthy Community Services, if you look that up, or Waterwise Gulf South, they have a list of all of the community projects that they've been working on for the last 3 or 4 years, I think.
Thank you. And Dee Dee, you want to talk about the areas in Holly Grove folks can check out?
So Holly Grove Neighbors Association partners with Piece by Piece New Orleans, and we built a space, a community garden space on Olive Street, 8729 Olive. So it's like the corner of Eagle and Olive. We have that space, and we've been leasing it since 2017 through New Orleans Redevelopment Authority. And through the generous donation of a church in Houston, have raised enough money to actually purchase the property. If you know anything about the Growing Green program from Nora, if you can lease for 3 years, then they'll sell it to you at market value. So we've been able to raise like 20,000, or they've been able to raise like $20,000 for us to purchase it and donate it to Holly Grove Neighbors Association so that they can put it into like a land or community trust. So that it's always the people who live in the neighborhood own the property to do with it what they choose. Right now we're growing food, but we have had conversations about Black-owned land cooperatives, affordable housing in the near future. And we just acquired 2 more properties or 2 more leases through the program. So we hope over the next 3 years we can raise money to purchase those properties and again put it into some kind of community or land trust.
Nice.
And we're not only are we acquiring properties, but we're using them to teach. I mentioned a summer camp that Piece by Piece hosts, using those properties as teaching tools, or those gardens as teaching tools, and teaching young people methods of sustainability.
And I'm happy to say that at my church, Franklin Avenue Baptist Church on Crowder, it is home to the largest impervious paved parking lot on planet Earth. When we began, I say that because it's the largest in New Orleans. And I think if it's the largest in New Orleans, it's probably the largest in Louisiana. And if it's the largest in Louisiana, it's probably the largest in that. And I just kind of went on to get to planet Earth from there. But that's a newly built a church building, and they decided to do it with that. And you'll also see that there are trees along the rows of the parking lots as well. And then also in New Orleans, as Dawn knows, is the largest number of solar rooftop panels on homes, which contributes to our city being one of the top U.S. cities for the most solar power generated that way, which is great thanks to when individuals have the opportunity to choose where they want to get their energy from, they go solar when it's a fair choice for folks. They don't keep the pollutant kind of energy. Anyone else want to have any shout outs about physical spaces here in New Orleans where folks are doing this kind of solid work around holding on to community and work and being in nature and in harmony with nature? I don't want to leave anybody out. Is Ashe a solid? Can you, Wood, has Ashe done anything like this on y'all's properties? Is there an opportunity?
Yeah, definitely. We have been in conversation with a couple of different folks from around the region to talk about how we can become more efficient and sustainable inside of our moment. We also had a conversation with the Kresge Foundation about just reinventing our land, thinking about our land and how we can make it a more active solar paneling, of course, on our properties, and then also using some of our Ashe has a great real estate portfolio, so using some of those spaces to try to be a little more green friendly.
Wonderful.
But I'd like to ask Arsene, where can you find out about the rain gardens? Because I would like to build one myself. I mean, is it easy for individuals to start? So where can we get that information from?
Absolutely. You can actually go to waterwisegulfsouth.org.
Mm-hmm.
And you can sign up for those events, or you can just shoot them a message and they will reach out to you to answer any questions available. Or you can also just call me.
Okay.
I mean, I'm right, yeah. I'm happy to I'm happy to have a chat with you about that for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Sally, someone from Ashe, I'm not sure who it was, but they have in the chat the idea of when we think about we won't be parading next year because of the pandemic. There will probably still be some bead throwing, which from a distance. So watch out if you're walking around the sidewalk. Might be a bead coming your way from somebody with quarterback skills. But at any rate, the idea of maybe the bead material, looking at that as an opportunity with maybe reusing plastic waste or using materials that are biodegradable. But the beads can be something that's a reusable. You don't have to keep getting new stuff. We can be using what we already have to make those beads. and avoiding waste at the end of the day. I feel like we're kind of at a stopping point. We kind of have we came to like a project-centered focus, which is an ongoing, not just a one-off commission, as 4 or 5 said, but some kind of ongoing resource for artists to be building awareness, changing behaviors if needed, but helping people in the city get more connected with the earth, right? And working to preserve it and doing it in a way that also preserves and holds on and does more dazzling, incredible stuff with our culture. Cess 4-5 is very, moving in that direction in some really powerful ways. I've just been hearing about your work since, and it's just like you've taken off. So I'm just so proud of you, Cess, and all the work that you do. And it's really wonderful meeting all of you. And I hope we can continue this conversation. Asali, we're going to be calling on you about how this commission idea could get rolling and moving. The only thing it lacks is some money. So that's the small part, right? we have the people, we have the great ideas. It's just how do we fund and support that going forward in a way that can really have some mobilizing impact to it, where we can kind of see the kind of ideas we're talking about coming to fruition and realizing those dreams. So with that, I want to just bid everybody an adieu. Thank you for taking this time to have this conversation at the Where You At on culture, racial equity, and climate action. I hope this will be the first of many more conversations and moving towards this idea of artists really leading and driving, being the drum majors around this work. So thank you all.
Thank y'all for having us.